From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in Sydney, just flown here from Melbourne, which is where I did spend New Year's Eve. I wasn't able to watch the fireworks live off the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but very pleased to be in Sydney for a fifth test in the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, with the series very much on the line.
Jim Maxwell back in Sydney, a few fireworks and maybe some good weather for this test match. Who knows? Sydney does have a little bit of a damp reputation in recent years. Anyway, all looking forward to that and a fitting finale to the series because it's rare that Sydney entertains a test match that's going to mean something in the series. So looking forward to it.
Well, I do hope the rain stays away. And by the way, Happy New Year to you, Alison, Jim, and of course, all those watching, listening regularly to Stump. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm back home in Bangalore, stepping up my rehab. Of course, that meant I have plenty of time to sit and lament everything that went on at the MCG. Big loss for India. Maybe the end of their hopes for the Test Championship. Who knows? But Sydney could change it all.
Good. There's a lot that can unfold over the coming week, that is for sure. A happy New Year to everybody, and I hope those who watched and listened to our best of for 2024 enjoyed that thoroughly as well. That's there on YouTube for you to look back on and to listen back as well. Well, we are going to reflect during this show on South Africa's men reaching the World Test Championship final for the very first time. But we are going to start here in Sydney, where it is all to play for in the fifth and final test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, a series that saw record-breaking crowds at the Boxing Day test at the MCG. It means that a win for Australia or a draw in Sydney will see them win the series for the first time since 2015. If India win, well, they'll level the series at 2-2, and as holders, that means they will retain the trophy. And this all comes after an incredible Boxing Day test in Melbourne, where it looked as if India might dig in for a draw in the very last session of the match, only for a 7-wicket collapse and an Australian victory by 184 runs, with more than 74,000 people in on that rare fifth day. Just extraordinary numbers. There was so much cricket still to be played on that final day, but goodness, more than 74,000. The attendance across 5 days was the biggest for any test in Australia ever. But there were so many different storylines to come out of the match. It was certainly one of the most eventful test matches I've ever been at. Jim, you and I were in the commentary box together. I mean, I was quite exhausted after the end of that 5 days, never mind the players, and they've got to turn it around and do it all again. But just so much happened, didn't it?
Yes, I think it was all sort of swelled by the ambience, the atmosphere of having so many people. It's an interesting stat you mentioned, a record for a test match in Australia. Now, have we ever had a crowd like that for a test match anywhere in the world? For a whole test match? I doubt it. I mean, 74,000 on the last
Eden
day.
Gardens?
So, seriously, 74,000 on the last day is about as many as you get into Trent Bridge for 5 days. I mean, the crowd was extraordinary, and it set a precedent. It's really going to put Australia-India, a Border-Gavaskar series, in Australia at any rate, above the Ashes from now on, in terms of crowd support, because there's a massive Indian diaspora now in Australia. But it doesn't matter. They'll come from Washington, Canada, India. They'll come from everywhere. We'll fill the grounds. So there's a good argument for having this every second or third year because, I mean, the cricket's been sensational, absolutely sensational. I mean, going into the last, have Australia batted too long here. They haven't given themselves enough time to bowl India out. And India, with Pant and Yaswal going along, they were going to get a draw until Pant had another master's stroke and collapsed. So it was a wonderful test match. And, well, hats off to test cricket. It keeps kind of redefining, re-energising itself and its profile the more we go. Just as we're going to talk about South Africa qualifying, what a game they played to make sure they got to the final.
Yeah, I have to say, by the end of the fifth day, when I thought back to Sam Constance's debut innings and the shoulder bump with Kohli, that all felt like it was months ago. So much had happened in between. But Charu, in and amongst it all, Rohit Sharma still struggled with the bat after going back up to open. Virat Kohli likewise. But reports now very much about discontent in the India camp, even suggesting that, there's a senior player trying to make a bid for the captaincy. Social media has been an absolute meltdown. It does seem that a few changes are afoot, though, when the coach does the pre-match press conference instead of the captain.
It's no fun to have the captain in such terrible batting form. He's a big problem. Kohli, too, forget the shoulder charge. His batting is obviously a very big concern. And the fact that, not that he's completely being blamed, but that Yashasvi run out was also very critical in that final test match, in the previous test match. So, and finally, of course, the rumor about the coach not getting along with certain members of the team or camps being created. As far as I'm concerned, I've heard only positive utterances from Gautam Gambhir, backing his senior players, backing everybody else. So I don't know where this this rumor of various rifts or problems with the Indian team are being generated, because on the face of it, they are still rallying around and they're still hoping to do well in the final test. Yes, things are not going well, but let's never forget that they are playing probably the best team in the world in their own backyard. So, there's no real right to believe that we should win all the matches in Australia all the time.
I mean, it's not often, is it, that you see a coach do a pre-match press conference and not confirm the captain's place in the team. He was also saying, the only thing that can keep you in the side is performance. And he talked about transition a couple of times. And this team, undoubtedly, if it's not transition now, then that is going to come in the, within the next 12 months, certainly there will be transitions. Melbourne was an epic, Charu, wasn't it? It did look like Jaiswal was going to help steer India to the draw. He faced 208 deliveries for his 84 runs. We had Jasprit Bumrah taking his 200th test wicket. There were some sort of, big plus points in there for India. He's also the only bowler who's got to this landmark with an average of lower than 20. He is without doubt the shining light in this side, isn't he?
Oh, without question. What would India have been in Australia during this tour had it not been for Bumrah? And I think that average is phenomenal. Of course, he's the quickest to this and quickest to that, but the average showing that he not only takes wickets but gives nothing away.
What of Mitch Marsh, though, because he's been dropped for this test match after poor returns with the bat and limited bowling as well. And so we've got Tasmania's Beau Webster coming in. But can you see Marsh playing test cricket again now?
No. But I think by the time he captures some form, if it happens, we will have moved on through Sri Lanka, then the West Indies, as I mentioned, and by then, Cameron Green will be back. So he's really been holding that spot until Cameron Green is ready to go, I would have thought. So I can't see him playing much more Test cricket. I don't know how Beau Webster fits in longer term. This might be a one-off. Who can say?
Next on Stumped, Australia and India, along with Sri Lanka, are still in contention for a place in the World Test Championship final. South Africa are now confirmed finalists at Lord's in June after they held their nerve to win the first test against Pakistan by 2 wickets in Centurion. South Africa was set 148 to win, but fell from 96 for 4 to 99 for 8, including losing 3 wickets for no runs in that time. But Kagiso Rabada and Marco Jansen put on an unbroken stand of 51 with the bat to get the win. And that caps a pretty remarkable turnaround for the Proteas, who were heavily criticised for sending a weakened side to New Zealand back in February because they were prioritising their domestic T20 competition. That turned out to be the only series they lost. Now, Jim and Charu, cricket South Africa has had its troubles in the past. They've been near bankruptcy. They've had a complete administrative overhaul. Did you imagine that they would be the side, the first side, to make it to the final?
No, I can't. But that's the contract. That's what they had to do to get there. They've been advantaged by having 2 test series, quite a few. But they've had to do what they needed to under the circumstances of this strange competition, which is based on a percentage, not the total points. They've done what they needed to do. So well done to them for achieving it. But it does feel like they got there by default, but they've qualified. You can't argue against that.
And the mathematics of it are that South Africa will have played 12 matches at the end of this cycle. They've got one more to come, compared to England's 22, for example, who've played the most of anybody. And South Africa are at the top of the table by dint of having won 7 of the 11 matches they've completed so far. So you can look at it in terms of, well, I mean, it is all about percentage of wins. You could argue that every time they play a test match, if it's just a series of 2 matches, there is greater importance on every one of those matches, because you lose one, that's 50% of your percent possible points that is gone, which is one way of looking at it. I mean, nothing is even in cricket. It could certainly be improved if everybody plays everybody. That to me is the biggest flaw, that in every cycle there are 2 teams that countries don't play. In this particular case for South Africa, it happens that they haven't played Australia or England. Jim has sort of spoken a bit, Charu, about the comments that have been going around that suggesting it's not fair that South Africa are in the final. But what's your sort of take on that in terms of the opponents that they've come up against and the small 2 test match series they've been playing?
Well, I'll say once again, no disrespect to South Africa or South African cricketers. It's not their fault. They haven't been given matches against Australia or India or whoever else. But they've had, should we say, the rub of the green in this World Test Championship cycle, and they've utilized it well. I mean, just the last match that you talked about, Pakistan kind of showed that, we can win this, 99 for 8. And they said, well, why don't we just lose it? But no disrespect, of course, because Marco played really well along with Kais or Rabada, who would have thought. So, they won whatever battles were presented. It's just that, can we tweak the World Test Championship points or the cycle or the whole methodology with a lot more weightage for every test match played? I think we talked about that too, that who are you playing, and according to that the whole weightage given on points is slightly complicated, but bear with me, because if you're playing weaker teams during the cycle and you tend to win and get to the top, you might be shown up with some other teams. So it's a lot more complicated. I'm glad that the ICC is continuing with the World Test Championship, because it just gives a bit of a focus at the end of the year to have a championship. But I'm sure lots more can be done to ensure some kind of parity in numbers or the opponents that one plays with in terms of weightage, at least.
Finally, on Stumped, we've touched in recent months on some of the innovators and inventions in the sport of cricket. We discovered more about the man who first bowled the googly. We heard from the creator of the T20 format of the game and learned about the inventor of the Merlin spin bowling machine. Well, this week we thought, because it's often been wet in Sydney, where Jim and I are, we thought we'd find out with who came up with the idea of the hover cover to keep the pitch dry, and just how they're being adapted to make sure that more cricket can be played. Now, the original designer of the hover cover was Stuart Canvas, who set up a company that now provides covers around the world, with the technology making its debut at Lord's in 1999. Now, Ed Stoddart bought the company back in 2006 and joins us now on Stumped to tell us a little bit more. Ed, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Anybody who doesn't know the hover cover, just describe for us what it is and how it works.
Well, the hover cover came to inception in 1999, and basically it's a device that hovers from the side of the pitch to the main wicket that's being played on in around about, it depends on how big the ground is, but in about 30 seconds, if not less. And the whole point was speed. That as rain is getting harder and faster, it's about covering that wicket as quickly as possible. And that's why we came up, or the original designers came up with the hover cover, because it just flies across the ground and doesn't do any damage to the outfield or the square when the actual hover gets into position.
I gather now, Ed, there are 6 in the UK and 2 overseas. My question would be almost, if it's so good, why are there not more, even across the UK?
You're absolutely right, and it's a very good question, and we're hoping to have something in place in this year. Unfortunately, it's the cost. So it is a hover, and there is a cost to it, and a lot of the professional grounds. So if you struggle to justify the spend on a hover, overseas, especially in Asia, where I've been to India several times to try and push the hover. Labor is a little bit cheaper than it is in the UK over there, and so therefore the cost of having a hover versus putting the tarpaulins that you referred to earlier over, it doesn't quite get justified. So, but we're hoping with the new developments that actually it will become more mainstay, and actually we're trying to re-engineer so it becomes more affordable. But it is the cost, unfortunately.
Is that the issue in Australia, the cost, or is it the weather conditions with wind and particularly Brisbane rain that can just flood the ground? Is it still just the cost? What about the logistics of storage? Is that a problem for our grounds?
So Australia has been one of the areas that I've most desperately wanted to get a hover into, because it's got very similar weather patterns. Yes, it's more monsoonish down there, but the hover can take that. We've had discussions, but we've never really got anywhere. That it hasn't uptaken, and partly because of cost. Yes, without a doubt, there is a storage, because you do need a set amount of storage space on the side of a ground. But most grounds, and there's only one in the UK that I can think of that doesn't have that space, and that's the Oval in London. But nearly other grounds can make the space for a test or an international. With Australia, we've yet to get to that conversation of space. We're trying to still get over the price and actually have proper conversations with the powers to be.
What about application of the technology for other sports? Does it work? Is it feasible?
So believe it or not, and this is a slightly wild one, we very much looked at, we work in horse racing as well as a business. And so what we looked at with the hover is converting the hover into a machine that is a frost cover. So what it'll do, it'll fly around the race course, heating or gently heating the grass. And so we came up with the idea. We looked at we talked to the powers to be in the UK, and the cost again came out, because you would have to have at least two flying permanently around. There was a sort of a spark that we had, but there's no other real sport that would need a hover.
So what, Ed, is the cost of a hover cover, and what might be the yearly upkeep cost?
Cost of a hover cover depends if you have an 80, 90 or 100 foot, but it's in excess of £100,000 for a new hover installed. That's in the UK. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more for overseas. And the upkeep cost is very limited, because what you've got is two 25 horsepower engines, which are very similar to the standard engines that groundsmen would have on their other products. And so therefore the upkeep is looking after that. It's oil, it's making sure the covers and the side sheets are attached and in good condition. So there isn't a vast amount needed, but it is just care and attention, just like with any other piece of equipment that the ground staff would have.
Thank you very much for sharing the story of the hover cover, a little bit of engineering insights into Stumped. We enjoy it. Thank you so much for being with us, Ed Stoddart.
No problems. Thanks for having me.
Owner of the company that produces the hover cover. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped. My thanks to Charu Sharma, Jim Maxwell, and to all of you for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.